Lori Contadino. She is the director of the Greenwich Commission on Aging. And since 2013, she's been responsible for identifying and responding to needs of older persons, formulating plans and setting priorities for new and improved services, and providing assistance to older adults through advocacy and community outreach efforts. She's also the manager of the Greenwich Senior Center, which I hope all of you have a chance to visit. Lori has been employed in the field of geriatrics for the past 37 years and has worked directly with older adults and their care partners in diverse care settings, ranging from community-based services like the Senior Center and through acute and long-term care environments. She serves on various boards, advisory boards, and committees, and is a frequent guest speaker for community groups and professional organizations. And her partner tonight is Donna Spellman. And Donna is the executive director of River House Adult Daycare Center, a nonprofit medical model adult daycare center serving Greenwich and Stamford communities since 1977. A fabulous facility. If you get a chance to visit, please do. Donna's dedicated her career to human services in the Lower Fairfield County area for over 30 years. She is proud to be a dementia champion and enjoys facilitating Dementia Friends workshops throughout Lower Fairfield County, such as the one you're seeing tonight. With that, Lori, thank you. Donna, thank you. And enjoy the program.
Thank you so much. And Kevin, thanks to you and Perrot Library for sponsoring this very important workshop. So the Dementia Friends movement is a global movement that started in the UK. And Dementia Friends focuses on 5 key messages about dementia itself, how it affects people, how we each can make a difference in the lives of those living with dementia, and what we can do to create a change in the culture of the community within which we live and have a higher awareness, a greater sensitivity, which lends to more support for individuals that are living with dementia and their care partners. So congratulations to each of you for taking a very important step this evening to join us. Donna?
Yep. So I echo Lori in saying welcome and thank you. It means so much to those of us who work with older adults when we see that there's so many of you who are interested in learning about dementia and wanting to become a dementia friend. It really speaks to our community and it speaks to all of us that are here tonight. So just getting right into it, if I'm going to ask that you all become unmuted because we're going to call on you or just yell things out. But when you think of dementia, can you just call out whatever comes to mind, any word that you think of when you hear the word or diagnosis of dementia? What comes to mind? If you can just unmute yourselves.
Confused.
Confused.
Forgetful.
Yep. Others?
Not remembering things.
Not remembering things.
Confusion.
Confusion, I heard. And can you say that again?
Forgetful.
Forgetful. Yep.
I would say frustrated.
Frustrated for sure.
It repeats a lot.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So are the things that we're talking about, are they good reactions? Are they happy reactions? Are they happy emotions? I'm thinking probably not. These are challenges. Well, we're going to hear tonight as we talk more and delve into dementia and what it is and what people experience and how do we know the difference between normal aging and dementia. we're going to hear a lot of the things that you just said. We're going to hear about confusion. We're going to hear about repetition. We're going to hear about memory loss. We're going to hear about just a lot of different symptoms and things that go into dementia. What's really important for everybody to understand is that dementia in and of itself is not a specific disease. And I know that's a little confusing because doctors often diagnose somebody with dementia, and that's a very, it's not really a disease. You don't really have dementia. You have perhaps a dementia-related disease. Most often, the most common dementia-related disease that we hear about is Alzheimer's. But dementia is actually, it's a grouping of symptoms. It's a wide range of symptoms that are associated with, as you said, with a decline in memory, with confusion, and so on. So, just kind of remember that what we're talking about is sort of the umbrella that is a grouping of symptoms. So we're going to talk about those symptoms and what dementia really looks like. How do you know when it's time to be concerned, and so on.
Mhm.
Okay, Lori, your turn.
Okay, thank you. So the prevalence of Alzheimer's disease is quite significant when we think of all the different dementias. So Alzheimer's is the most common form of dementia. About 80% of all dementia cases are of the Alzheimer's type. And it is a disease largely of later life. So when you think about the longevity bonuses that we've all gotten, or that perhaps are in store for us, the fastest growing segment of our population is that of individuals 85 and older. And once you reach the age of 85, the risk of getting dementia or developing dementia increases. So it increases with age, but it's not a normal part of aging. And that's really important. So let's talk a little bit about normal aging. So I don't think there's anyone here that's a teenager, right? No. Okay, so we've all experienced age-related changes as we've gone through life and as we've transitioned from one of life stages to another, right? We've noticed changes in our eyesight. We've noticed perhaps graying of our hair and the need to color it, or whatever it is that we do. We've noticed that maybe our eyesight has shifted and we need to wear glasses, or we've had cataract surgery and we no longer need to wear glasses. And all of those things are normal elements that we all experience, physiological changes that we experience as we age. But some changes that individuals experience might be troubling. And when those changes impact an individual's ability to function successfully in the world, that's when it becomes, the ability, the time for us to take a deeper look at that. Okay, so let's talk about what some changes might be that are normal, and other things that might be considered a pathology of aging, or something that we should take a look at. Okay, so the first sign is memory loss that disrupts daily life. So Alzheimer's disease, dementia, the cornerstone is forgetting, right? People tend to forget short-term memory things in their immediate present, what they had for breakfast, what they had for lunch, who visited, all of those things. The short-term memories are somewhat fleeting. And we know that the long-term memories really stay intact. And as we move through this workshop, we're going to show you a really incredible video. Both Donna and I find this quite impactful in terms of how it frames the short-term and the long-term memory. But we know, for example, that using like modern technology, and I'll give the example of, I think that we have 3 remote controls now for the television in our family room, okay? And I'm not quite certain which buttons, I should press or not press, and which buttons will get me into a lot of trouble and I won't be able to, recover. But I know that those remotes are for the smart TV. The difference with someone that has dementia is they don't know that that remote is perhaps connected or a device for the television. They would be mystified and maybe point the remote at something that the remote is not intended to operate. Okay. And that's just a very quick example of some of the confusion that some individuals may experience.
Another sign or challenge is when people have difficulties in planning or solving problems. I'll give you an example. Anybody who cooks, who has a favorite recipe, something that you make all the time where suddenly it's just gone. You have no idea. You just those things that used to be just rote, just you knew, you didn't even have to think about it, and suddenly it's gone. You have no idea. That's when it's a little bit more of, I would say, a symptom. Now, what is typical with normal aging? I mean, we all make mistakes. I mean, how many people, well, I don't know how many people actually balance their checkbook because everything is so computer based, but people, we didn't add the numbers correctly. We make a mistake. That's normal. That's typical. And I would say that, a lot of these things, just to put people's minds at ease, I think we all lead very busy lives and we're easily distracted. And we think that we're multitasking, but the truth is the more that we're piling on, we're not really multitasking. It's just that we're dabbling. So like for this minute, I'm doing this, and maybe a minute later, I'm doing something else. But the more we do, the more opportunities we are to make a mistake or forget. That's normal. That's typical. That's our lives. That's the lifestyle we live. But forgetting something that, you're driving home and suddenly you have no idea how to get home. Things that are normal and typical where all of a sudden it's just you're lost. That's when it's a little bit more concerning.
Right. And the example that Donna just shared, that difficulty or inability to complete familiar tasks, such as driving to a familiar location. So you go to church or services every Saturday or every Sunday, you drive yourself there, and all of a sudden you get lost on the way to your faith community. Okay. That's something that is not typical. That's not normal. And that would be something that would be a cause for concern. Okay. As Donna mentioned, managing a budget, all of those higher level, I guess, executive function type skills. All of a sudden, if you're mystified by something that was just routine for you, that's generally when, it's a cause for concern to us or to members of a family. For normal aging, what we experience is, I've been using Zoom like the rest of you for the past 15 months. And sometimes I still, can't find, where the chat feature is, or how do I do this on that, and needing to ask a question, even though it's something that, I've been doing now for the past, year plus. That's typical, right? But, you understand the other. The other is just kind of disconnecting from, something that you've always done, that you've learned, that you had mastery over.
Another sign or concern is when people become confused with time or place. And I'll give you an example. You don't know what season it is. It's hot out, and well, today was beautiful out. So today could have been an easy day to kind of forget the season. But think back 2 days ago when we were sweltering and you're looking for your winter coat. That's confusion. Or I'll tell you what's normal. Okay, what's normal, and this, I often say this is like the best normal that happens when you realize, is that I will sometimes bolt out of bed on a Saturday morning thinking that it's a weekday and think, oh my God, I'm late for work. And then finally realize that, it's Saturday. And then do that's like the happiest normal ever, because I realize that I can relax again and take my time. But, we all forget what day it is. It's easy, especially, especially when you go on vacation and you have no idea what day it is, hopefully, because you're a little bit less structured. That's a good thing. That's a normal thing. That's a typical thing. But, it's not normal and it's not typical when that confusion, when you don't figure it out. I think the bottom line for all of these things is the ability to then sort of catch yourself or figure it out. It's more typical of somebody with Alzheimer's who that recall and that ability to figure it out, it's just not there. So.
Absolutely. So the fifth sign is trouble or difficulty in understanding visual or spatial relationships. So there could be vision changes that accompany Alzheimer's disease. Someone may have difficulty reading, judging distances, determining color or contrast. And I'm going to give you a couple examples. So years ago, when I first started out my career, I was in a long-term care facility, and there was a beautiful carpet in the community room. And this carpet was adorned with long stem roses, the most beautiful patterned carpet you ever saw. Well, unfortunately, some of the residents living with dementia would bend down and try to pick up the roses. So their ability to differentiate, what was just a pattern on the carpet, to them, it was a real rose that they were trying to pick up. Another example that was shared by someone in one of our first sessions, probably 2 years ago at this point, was there was a woman, and the family members were concerned about their loved one because all of a sudden she was having episodes of incontinence, and their fear was that all of a sudden she was propelled into another stage, right? She was losing functioning, and this was so heartbreaking, and this came out of nowhere. And why did this occur? Well, come to find out that someone had, the thought of putting a scatter rug, a throw rug, and it was in front of the bathroom door, and it was the color black. And the woman perceived the carpet as a hole in the floor. And so she couldn't step over it, was afraid of falling in it, and was repeatedly having accidents. When the rug was removed, those accidents that she was experiencing, that unfortunate loss of dignity, just completely went away. And so you can understand how, when we perceive our environment in a way other than what it was intended or other than what truly is there, it's problematic for the person that has some dementia.
We see that at River House all the time. People walk through the door and there's a hesitation. So we really have to help and lead people through the door, because there's a different colored rug. It's carpeting, it's attached to the floor, but it's a different color in the entryway. And, or like the saddle in a doorway, you might see people hesitate to enter in and out of a doorway because the saddle, our perception, or once I made this mistake, I learned the hard way, but I like to celebrate every holiday we can celebrate. So it was Halloween, and I bought these great tablecloths with witches and pumpkins and everything, every pattern you could have on these tablecloths. And then we were playing bingo, because bingo is one of our favorite games, and we have a good time playing bingo. and people were losing their bingo chips in the in the pattern of the table. They couldn't differentiate which was the tablecloth and which was the chips because it was just too busy. So, I've since learned that we use bright colors and solids, just to make it easier. But that's a real thing. It's a real stumbling point. And these are things that, when we learn them and we're with people who struggle with this, these are things that we can make so much easier because we now have the knowledge and we know. Another thing is, another sign is when people have difficulties with words in speaking or writing, familiar words. And here's an example. So this thing on my wrist, we all know is a watch. Somebody with Alzheimer's might refer to it as a clock, my clock. They might forget the word watch, or, just again, something that's a normal word that we, that it was there once and we just can't recall it. Now, we all forget words. We forget names, we forget words, but again, we will remember it. Those of us who do not have a dementia-related diagnosis will remember it. We might remember it later. It could be a name. It could be, whatever it is that we were struggling. It might be tonight when you go to sleep and you're like, right, that's the word. How could I have forgotten that? That happens. That's to me, again, that's because we're busy. That's like sensory overload. It's just because. It's because we're tired. It's because of a lot of things. But somebody with Alzheimer's, let's say, it's much less common that they're going to recall that word, or written. Somebody who loves to write or might make a grocery list, maybe can't remember lunch bags, plastic bags, freezer bags. Maybe can't remember and might, I don't know, might just not write it down or write down something that maybe describes it as opposed to the actual word. So something to think about.
Absolutely. So we've all experienced what Donna described, and there is a real term for this. This is the tip of the tongue syndrome. So you know that person, but you can't think of their name. And you went to a restaurant and you're trying to share with your pal or your friend or your family. You have this delicious, what is it called? And the more stressed we get, the less likely we are to remember. And that's why when we move away from it and 10 o'clock at night, we're just kind of chilling, we're getting ready for bed. And all of a sudden it comes to you and you say, it was Donna. I had this delicious ravioli. This is the name of the restaurant, whatever. And, the information at that point is useless to you, but you do feel some sense of pride and satisfaction that it did come through, right? It didn't come through when you wanted it to, but it does come through. And that's normal aging. And that does occur as we get older. And I like to think that the older that I get, I have so much more information in my storage bank that it just takes a little longer to pull that information up to the forefront. The difference with someone living with dementia is that they don't have the ability to stick with the task, to really reflect on it, to then say, okay, this and that, because the thought is just gone. Okay. So another sign is misplacing things or losing the ability to retrace our steps. So you rush into the kitchen only to get there and have no clue why you're there. And you have to retrace your steps and you go back to the bedroom and say, oh, that's what I wanted. And then you go back to the kitchen and get what it was. Okay, that's normal aging. And I don't think that there's anyone here that something similar to that hasn't happened to. And I tell you that the busier I get, the more often it happens. I'm focused on so many different things that I guess I'm not truly actively attending. So it's something that occurs. The difference with someone living with dementia is that they'll find themselves in the kitchen And there's no ability to re-cue, to go back to their point of origin. They're just in the kitchen, not knowing why they're there, but they're there, okay? They don't have the ability to hold on to the thought, to retrace the steps, to kind of problem solve like we do. So it's an active attempt of problem solving, of really figuring out what it was that we needed. And that's the chief, difference in that arena. Donna?
Yep. So the next one is poor judgment. And this is hard because particularly when it comes to money, because that's a big sign. Suddenly somebody is like giving away all their money. You find out that your loved one went to the bank and is just withdrawing money and giving it to whomever. What makes this hard is that unfortunately in this crazy world that we live in, there's a lot of people that there's a lot of scams and the scammers are really good at what they do. So even those who are most responsible oftentimes fall prey to these. So that doesn't always mean that somebody is experiencing symptoms of dementia. But here's another example if it's not money, poor grooming. Somebody who really took really good care of themselves and suddenly just grooming is they're not showering or and a really big sign of dementia often is people get into the shower and they forget what to do. So some families, I'll hear families say that, we've had the same bottle of shampoo for 6 months and it's just been untouched. That happens. That's quite common. Even from a sensory perspective, sometimes the temperature of the water or even the feeling of water on somebody's body, it's not, our senses things aren't always the same. But those are signs of poor, it seems like it's a poor judgment or a change in judgment. The person and suddenly they're making decisions and choices that are just not in line with the person that and again, what's normal is that we all make a mistake. We all, I don't know, I think everybody has made a decision where we're like, okay, that was just a really bad decision. But we know it and we know for the next time. Whereas somebody with dementia, I think it happened and they're on to the next thing. So it's a little bit more concerning.
Right. So the 9th sign is withdrawal from work or social activities. So sometimes individuals remove themselves from situations where perhaps they're not feeling that same sense of mastery that they had experienced before. Perhaps there's a recognition that they're having difficulty tracking the conversation. They've perhaps, gone to contribute and used the wrong word or couldn't come up with the word. And the diminishing impact of experience something like that, people tend to withdraw, right? They don't want to be embarrassed. They don't want to embarrass their spouse. It's very stressful. They don't want to be found out. And they may avoid being social because of the changes that they're experiencing. And we know that the most important thing for individuals throughout the life course is that we stay socially engaged, cognitively stimulated, and that doesn't change just because you have a diagnosis of dementia. We all need the ability to have meaning in life, to feel that there's a purpose, that a sense of belonging. And all too often, the world of a person living with dementia, as well as their care partner, becomes smaller and smaller and smaller. What perhaps you had in common with friends or other couples maybe is not something that you can participate in anymore. Maybe you used to play bridge together, or maybe you had a hobby that requires a higher level thinking, and you're just not there any longer. Okay, your deficits are now visible, and and for perhaps what's normal for us is that, if I haven't done something for a long time, it might take me just a little bit to kind of get ramped up again and then be back on my way doing what I did because it comes back, right? The person that perhaps was an incredibly gifted crocheter, right? All of a sudden, they don't remember the stitches and what they used to create, beautiful, beautiful pieces for all of their great grandkids. And now another new life has entered and they just can't do it. They can't figure it out.
So along with that is when you see people with like very noticeable changes in mood and changes in personality, and I would say particularly when a routine is changed, if you had planned to go to one restaurant and you decided en route that, let's go here instead. And somebody who might have been, pretty flexible and said, yeah, let's do that. But now all of a sudden becomes very, very, very irritable because you changed the plan. That's not what you said you were going to do. Somebody, when there's a change, a real change. Now, some people just are less flexible. Sorry about this aura that's around me. I can't make the sun get out of my, it's me. But anyway, eventually the sun will go down, I guess. So again, what's typical with normal aging, when you develop specific ways of doing things and you don't like it, and it's your personality that you want things to kind of go the way that you planned. Again, some people are more flexible than others, but when you see a true change in mood and personality from somebody that's just not typical of who that person is, it's usually much more dramatic. Particularly those of us who are women, we tend to be a little moody at times. Not me, of course, but any of us anyway. Or I should say, my husband, he's moodier than me. But anyway, when we can have mood changes, I think that's normal. But when you see something that's completely abnormal for a person that you know well, that's when it's a little bit more concerning. One thing that I want to say is that we just listed 10 symptoms. You might have heard one symptom and said, oh my goodness, I think that's me. Remember at the beginning when we talked about dementia was a grouping of symptoms. It's a group of symptoms. So to have one of these things, that's not necessarily pointing towards a dementia-related diagnosis. It's when you have a grouping of these symptoms. That's when you maybe want to be a little bit concerned.
And it's always when whatever you're experiencing or the person you care about is experiencing interferes with the ability to live their life and function, in a daily fashion, the way that they used to, the way they'd like to. So when it impacts your ability to function, that's, really when you want to, go see someone like a geriatrician or whomever, just to see what's going on, because there are so many treatable, reversible things that can cause changes in cognition. So infections, fevers, urinary tract infections, medication interactions, polypharmacy, and the list just goes on and on and on. And wouldn't it be great news that there was something treatable, reversible, and you go back to baseline? And that's why you always go to a medical professional, a physician that's knowledgeable about these things.
Absolutely. You should have received, when you signed up for tonight's workshop, you should have received a workbook. Just by a show of hands, does everybody have that workbook kind of handy so that you could refer to it? Okay, so for those who do, and those who don't worry about it, because this is just, it's more about what we come up with than it is, it's not a test. But there, if you refer to page 4 in your workbook, for those who have it handy, there are some broken sentences, and we're gonna ask you to just take a minute, 2 minutes at the most, to just take a look at those broken sentences. If you don't have the workbook handy, just sit tight for a minute. We're going to talk about what those sentences are just by people answering the questions out loud. So take a minute or two, and then we'll get back to you.
So I think that we can talk about this a little bit. The first prompt is dementia is not, and we talked about this in the beginning, and I know that Donna and I were kind of repetitive on this point. And if you were to take anything away from this workshop, this is the one message we'd like you to take away, that dementia is not what? Oh, you're all muted. Craig, can you unmute everyone?
It's not a disease.
Right. It's not a normal part of aging, right?
Right. And you're right. And Anne, you're right. It's not a disease in and of itself. You are correct.
Right. It's a grouping of symptoms, right? Right. It's not a normal part of aging.
Right.
Second one.
Dementia is caused by anybody?
Diseases of the brain.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
That's it. Dementia is not just. Anyone want to share their thought on that? What would you match that one up with? Dementia is not just
About having memory problems.
correct. It's not just about having memory problems. Look at all the things that we just talked about: planning, judgment, et cetera, spatial relationships, vision.
Right. And this one, from my perspective, is number one important. It is possible to have Sue, I see that you're saying it, but you're muted, but I know that you said the right thing because I saw your lips move. It is possible to have a good quality of life with dementia. That's what you were saying, correct?
There we go.
There you go.
Thank you. There it is. Okay. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Donna.
It is absolutely possible to have a good quality of life with dementia.
And lastly, there's more to the person than
dementia.
the only response that's left for us to match it to.
Just dementia, right?
Then their dementia, right? And so who wants to be known by their diabetes or their cancer or their arthritis or whatever other diagnosis they have, their hypertension, their heart disease? Why is it that we want to label someone with dementia and define them that way? No one is defined by one factor, right? We are complex human beings. It is one element, and we don't want to be defined by our diagnoses.
I have a funny, I always think of something that happened to me when I was a teenager. I broke my ankle and I was in the emergency room and I was sitting in a wheelchair waiting to be taken into X-ray, and somebody was identifying me to the person who was going to take me into X-ray, and they said, just take the ankle in. And I remember thinking, I'm not the ankle, I'm the whole person. Are you just going to take my ankle? And that has always stayed with me, because we're not ever, nor should we be identified by our ailment or our challenge, because we're all people, and there's a whole person that goes with it. So that always sort of rings truth to me. The next thing that we want you to do, and I hope that this is as impactful for you as it is for me every time I see this video. But Craig, we're going to have you turn it over to a video that's just for a few minutes. It's about 3 or 4, maybe about 4 minutes long, and then we'll talk about the video.
Hi, I'm Natalie. I'm a Dementia Friends champion, and I'm going to explain dementia to you in the way that it was explained to me. It's not a scientific explanation, but it should give you some insight into how dementia might affect someone. But remember, dementia affects each person in different ways. First of all, I'd like you to imagine that I'm 80 years old and that beside me there's a bookcase that's as tall as I am and it's filled with books. Each of those books represents a memory, a fact, something that I've learned in the last 80 years. Right by my head would be my most recent memories, maybe what I had for breakfast this morning. By my shoulders, I might have my 60s, maybe my retirement party. By my knees, I'd probably have my 20s, so maybe when I met my partner. And then all the way down by my feet would be my childhood memories, maybe my first day of school. Dementia rocks my bookcase. So as it rocks my bookcase, what do you think is likely to happen to those books? They're going to fall out, aren't they? And which ones do you think are likely to fall out first? The ones at the top. So that might explain why my short-term memory would be affected first. As my dementia progresses, I might find that my most recent memories, that's to say, the books that are highest on my bookcase, being from further down, from earlier in my life. Now, say I've got to the point where all of my top shelves are empty and I'm living in the 1950s. I want you to embrace my reality. I'm going to go into my kitchen today and try and make myself a cup of tea. But remember, I think I'm living in the 1950s. So what's going to be different about my kitchen? You're probably thinking the layout, the appliances. Now remember, I want to make tea. The kettle, right? It's likely to be electric rather than a whistling kettle that you put on the hob. You might see me, when you come round one day, filling up my electric kettle and doing what with it? Putting it on the hob. Now say that you're my loved one, my carer, my friend, and you see me doing this, you might be tempted to say, you cannot make your own tea anymore, it's just too dangerous. But how might that make me feel? I might feel sad, frustrated, like I'm losing my independence, thirsty. Now, as I said, embrace my reality. What could you do differently to help me to make my own tea for longer? You could buy me a whistling kettle. Now, of course, I'm not saying that's going to help everybody at different points in their dementia, but at this point, it would help me. So this just goes to show how embracing my reality can really help me to live well with my dementia. From what you've heard so far, you might think that someone with dementia loses everything. But actually, that's because I've only told you about one part of the brain. I've told you about my factual bookcase. Now, this represents my hippocampus. That's the part of my brain where I manage factual and biographical data, so things like names and faces and dates and numbers. And unfortunately, it's built of really flimsy wood and is not very resistant to dementia, which is why it's going to rock so much. And I'm more likely to lose those books. However, there's another part of my brain that manages my feelings and my emotions. That part of the brain is called the amygdala, and it's much more resistant to dementia. So I'd like you to picture that as a separate bookcase, but that is made of solid oak. So even though it will be rocked, the contents will be safer for longer. Now let me explain to you how the two bookcases work together. Say when I was a child, I had a teacher, so the fact of that teacher is going to go way down by my feet on my factual bookcase, but the way he made me feel, which was inspired and like I could do anything in my life, is going to go on the emotional bookcase. Let me give you some examples of how that might work today when I have dementia. So think again, you're my loved one, my carer, my friend, and you come round and we have a blazing row. We have a really big argument because I've forgotten your name. Now, the fact of that argument is going to go on my factual bookcase. What feelings do you think are going to go onto my emotional bookcase? Sadness, anger, frustration. And as you go home, you might think, it doesn't matter. She's going to forget that we had the argument and that I shouted at her. And you're right, I probably will. But what's likely to stay with me are those feelings of sadness and anger and frustration with nothing to connect it to. I'm going to leave you with a positive example. So I'd like you to picture that you've come to visit me, we've gone out to the seaside, we had an ice cream, we had a brilliant day, and I feel safe and warm and loved. But on the way home, I've forgotten the ice cream and I've forgotten the day out, and you might think, it's just not worth visiting anymore. But look, you've left me with those feelings of happiness and safety and love, and that's what really matters. At Dementia Friends, we want to encourage everybody who knows someone with dementia to continue to visit and spend time with people with dementia and help them to live well. And always remember, there is more to the person than the dementia. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any reaction? Your reaction to that?
I thought it was very well done. It's a great description. It really brings to life the concept as opposed to just.
Yeah, I felt
reading
the same. I felt that it really explained things very, very well.
It's a very powerful video, isn't it?
Mhm.
Yeah. Any other reactions to that?
I was just, when she said, when she was giving the negative example and she said, so I may forget, but the feelings of sadness or anger, whatever, are still there.
Mm-hmm.
How does someone caring for someone with dementia, how do they help with that?
Well,
Oh, so you're saying, Anne, if there was an experience and then that person is no longer there, and then you're the caregiver and you see that the person you're caring for is upset.
Yes.
That what you're asking?
Yes.
I'll give you an example that I hope will help. There's a woman who used to attend River House, and River House is, as we talked about before, is our adult daycare center in Greenwich. And there would be a time in the morning that she would become very upset, and I would go over, and this happened like morning after morning, and I would go over and ask her what was wrong, and she'd be very teary-eyed, and she would say, "My mother died." Now, this woman was in her late 80s, so, you know, there would have been no point whatsoever in me saying, no, like that happened 60 years ago. I mean, that just wouldn't have been helpful. So in answer to your question, I think, and what I would say to her was, "I'm so sorry, tell me about your mom." And we would start talking, and she would tell me about her mom and tell me stories. And basically we would work through it. I would say that in answer to your question, one tool that really helps is to kind of meet people where they're at and help them get through it instead of trying to convince them otherwise. We can't convince them otherwise. It doesn't work. And it's very hard to do. As caregivers, it is so hard to do. I'm not for 1 second saying that this is an easy task. It's frustrating, it's upsetting because, you know, the caregiver's in the here and now, and you're dealing with somebody who maybe isn't. Meet people where they're at, help them like almost ride that wave, and help them find their way to a better emotional place, which is what I would do every morning. And then we would get on with our day, and focus on the things that bring happiness and
right. And it's a great deal of gentle redirection, and what works today may not work tomorrow. And so it's perhaps a series of things that you try that may bring you success in terms of shifting from that mood to a better place, right? Yeah, because seeing someone you love in a state of distress is very unsettling, right? And there's something called this boomerang effect, with caregivers when you're caring for someone living with dementia, that you've lined all these things up, you have all these supports, things are going well, and you've got this, right? You've got it. And then what happens? That boomerang comes flying back and everything changes, right? And you have to start all over again. And this is a very common phenomenon when caring for individuals living with dementia, that it's so dynamic. Things are always shifting. And, it's an unfortunate part of what the disease brings to the table, and the challenges that it brings, not only for the person that's experiencing all of these things, but for everyone in their world that cares for them and about them. Yeah, and we're going to talk about some communication strategies, and just out of respect for time, Donna, I think we should probably get into everyday tasks, and then we'll go into communication, and we'll go from there. And perhaps after you frame this, Donna, we can just unmute everyone. And that way we can have some conversation about this little exercise that Donna and I want to take you through.
Right. So our everyday task, we're going to unmute you, or you're going to unmute yourself. And just by calling out, how many steps do you think it takes? What do you think is involved in making a peanut butter and jelly sandwich? Just
10.
10 steps. Can you talk about like maybe what those steps might be?
Well, you got to get the peanut butter, unscrew the top,
Okay.
get the jelly, unscrew the top, get the bread out of the whatever it's in, put it down, smear the jelly, smear the peanut butter, and then put it together. I don't know if that's 10 steps. So
miss getting the knife.
Getting the knife.
I forgot.
Unless you're smearing it with your hand.
And all of that assumes, of course, that you remember where those things are and locate them and put them in the right place.
That's an excellent point, Liz. Excellent point. So who thinks that, there's a few more steps involved in that? What could you add to Anne's description of making a peanut butter and jelly sandwich in terms of what steps might come before or, in the middle? What would you add? And Anne, you never ate it. So I noticed that, you just ate it. So, all right. So what do you think? Is there anything else that you could insert before, in the middle,
I suggest that you might want to make sure that there's peanut butter, jelly, and bread in the house. And then maybe whoever would put it there or went shopping, or you went with that person.
And that's an excellent point. That's
jelly
right.
If it's not there.
That's right, because no one's making a sandwich if the peanut butter and jelly and the bread is not there, right? Right. So,
Right.
So if we tell you, Donna and I tell you that there are more steps to this, what do you think in terms of how many more steps?
Well, I was thinking you have to.
There's several. One, the jelly might be in the refrigerator, so you have to go find it.
That's right. That's right. That's where my jelly is. My jelly's in the fridge. Okay. Well, the reality is that, and we talked about planning.
I'm gonna put the peanut butter and jelly sandwich on a plate.
Oh,
and
see,
you might
that's
want
right.
to get it out of the cabinet
Mhm.
and then put it back on a table.
Right.
Right. Yeah. Look at that. And, someone at one of our earlier sessions told us that they like to toast their bread. Okay. My goodness. I'm feeling overwhelmed. The reality is that there are over 100 small steps or decisions that go into making a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. So that means that there are 100 opportunities for a person living with dementia to get off track. So as the caregiver, if you put the bread and the peanut butter, even if you put everything right on the table and said to the person you care for, make yourself a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. I'm going to go throw in a load of laundry. And you come back upstairs, everything is still where it was when you left. Because the ability, as we talked earlier, to re-cue, to think about, what's involved. There is the unfortunate occurrence is that there can be a disruption at every step along the way. So you open the peanut butter and then we know that you're going to put the knife in and spread it on the bread, right? But the person living with dementia, depending, of course, what stage they're in. So this is not something that occurs, with everyone, but the planning and executing is what's important. And so any task, you can understand why small, manageable steps like modeling for someone. So you sit down together and you take the peanut butter on your knife and you spread it on the bread and you ask the person that you care
It's 20 hours.
I'm so sorry.
The same. That's okay. To do the same, right? So you're modeling. They're seeing what you're doing. They're going to do the same thing. Or you just cue one step at a time, right? But no one has the time to give 100 little cues, right? Unscrew the peanut butter, pick up the knife, put the knife in the jar, take some peanut butter out. So you get the idea, right? And so that's why what seems to be very straightforward and simple for us can be an absolute tragedy for someone not being able to be successful. And then think about the feeling then of something so simple and not being able to be successful at making a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, right? Donna, did you want to add to that?
Just that you can turn it around, as Lori alluded to, we can turn it around and help it to be a success if we just slow things down, not to make it childlike, just to make it understandable. And I think the takeaway, what I learn every single day in my professional life, but also in my personal life, is patience. I cannot be in a rush, and I cannot expect everybody around me to be in a rush. I need to slow down. I need to have patience, and we all end up happier in the end when we all just take a little bit more time. We're going to talk next, and we're just to let you know where we're at. We're sort of nearing the final points of our presentation, but probably, in my opinion, amongst the most important points is the art of communication. And I think that this really kind of speaks to how to help somebody make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich without having them realize that you're helping them make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. It's all in how we communicate. So Lori, take it away.
Right. So communication is really important, right? That's how we get our needs across. That's how we're understood. That's how we're validated. So communication is really pivotal in all of our lives. but it's increasingly important to communicate in a fairly precise way with individuals living with dementia. All human beings should be treated with respect and dignity. And that's not just because I have a diagnosis or, because I am the age that I am. We all want to be treated with respect and dignity. And, when we never talk past the person, and I'm sure you've either experienced it yourself, or you've been in situations, or you've heard stories about perhaps a medical professional that talks past the person with dementia, just to the care partner, right? And just bypasses that. So they're talking to the caregiver and they're leaving the person that this is all about out of the conversation, okay? That's not treating someone with respect and dignity, okay? We make eye contact with whoever it is that we're speaking with, regardless of, their cognitive capability.
We need to be aware of our own feelings when we're communicating to others, both with people with dementia, but just people in general. I mean, if I've had a rough day at work and I come home and I'm snapping at my family, that's not really fair. They didn't have a rough day at work. We have to check in with ourselves and kind of leave our baggage at the door pretty much. But somebody with dementia, that only complicates the communication, because remember, those feelings is what people hang on to. So if I'm irritated and rushed and just annoyed, that's what they're hearing more than what I'm saying. That's what somebody could be reacting to. So we all need to check in with ourselves and be aware of how we present. This is a true fact that you can't be angry if you smile. Try it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm totally serious. It's just not humanly possible. You can't happen. Anyway.
Oh my goodness. It is so difficult to be patient all the time. Let's be honest. Okay. And living with someone with dementia, caring for someone with dementia, it takes everything. It taxes every element of and every fiber of your existence at times. And we've all experienced exasperating moments throughout life. My children continue to deliver those moments to me on a regular basis. So we have to forgive ourselves. We're not expected to be perfect. We want to be patient, because the person that is the recipient of our frustration is someone that we care about. And who isn't frustrated by being asked the same thing 10, 15 times over and over and over again. And so my hope is that you remember to try to be as patient, as supportive as possible. Take care of yourselves. Take a deep breath. Take a little walk around the house. Come back to it. Revisit it, whatever works for you. When we talk just a slight bit more about communication, we're going to talk about the art of not arguing. And really, it'll leave you all in a better place, as well as the person that is the recipient of the care that you're giving.
We need to slow down. We talked about the peanut butter and jelly sandwich, or the art of making the sandwich, and that there perhaps were like too many steps and too many directions, but also the speed at which we talk and the amount of information that we're putting out there. Sometimes it's just too much, and people often have trouble finding the words. So I'm going to do a 20-second exercise. When I say go, we're all going to be silent, which is hard for me because I talk too much, but we're all going to be silent for 20 seconds. So I'm going to start my clock right now. Okay, that was 20 seconds. How'd that feel? Anybody that's unmuted, what did 20 seconds feel like?
Long.
Yeah. Yeah, really long.
It does. It feels really
relaxing.
Oh, it's relaxing. Okay.
I do deep breathing when I finally am able to close my mouth and not talk.
Yeah, but Sue, if you were in conversation with someone, would that feel relaxing if you're waiting for someone's next word or thought?
I would try not to put the word in their mouth because they're trying to figure out what the word is or what they want to say. And I think one of the worst things we could do is, and hardest things that we wanted to avoid, is to fill in some of this person's conversation. We have to be just, you know.
You're here. I think that there are times, and actually, so you're writing the script of what we're talking about. Actually, there are times that we could offer assistance. I think that comes with really knowing the person. We did this workshop a few days ago, and somebody who's the sister of somebody who has dementia said that her sister finds it really helpful when she helps her find that missing word. I think there are people that are like, yes, that's it. Yes, that's what I'm trying to say. And then to your point, Sue, there are people that, give me a second, let me think, let me find what I'm trying. They might not be saying that, but you could see that, give them the opportunity to find the words. I have a child who has dyslexia, and his processing is a little bit slower. And I mean, he's older now, but when he was a child, I learned, not because of dementia, but because of dyslexia, I learned that he needed a few extra seconds to complete his sentence. And I learned the art of patience as a mother, because otherwise my son would never have that opportunity to get his thoughts and his needs across. And so that was a good lesson for me just in life. But yes, allowing people time, and you'll know when it's time to offer help, and you'll know when it's time to just, as Sue suggested and others suggested, just breathe. Just be okay with the silence for a few seconds. It's okay. Nothing's going to happen. Go ahead, Laura.
Yes, it is. So we're going to move through some strategies and some suggestions. So we talked about arguing, and if someone says something you don't agree with, if they're insistent, what do you gain by arguing? It's not about being right. The arguing is just going to increase their frustration, your agitation. You're both going to, your amygdala is going to be firing all kinds of things, right? So we avoid arguing, right? We meet folks where they are. It may not be a rational thought, as Donna shared the example of a loved one that passed away maybe 40 years ago, but we meet folks where they are. Avoid arguing. It's protective to you, it's protective to the individual, and it's not about correcting their wrongs, okay? We already talked about offering a guess. And that depends on a lot of factors, doesn't it? It depends on knowing the person. It depends on how well your attempt to rescue or to assist is perceived. And I'll tell you, with me, it depends on who's trying to help me, right? So it might irritate me if Donna's filling in my words, but it doesn't irritate me if John fills in my words. Okay. So that's just, something unique about me. Okay. And there's individual differences, and that doesn't change just because, someone has is living with dementia. We encourage nonverbal communication, and sometimes if they're mystified by the word, and Donna shared the example of clock, if they can point to what they need or what they want or what they need help with, and perhaps you do the same. And gesturing really goes a long way. And I know that we're kind of going back and forth in this section, Donna, but as far as gesturing, instead of saying, do you have to use the bathroom? You might say, the bathroom is here, and you just gesture with your hand, right? So you're affirming what's here, and you're guiding in that direction. Someone might, instead of saying, where's your hat? You might say, or instead of saying, where is it? What's it? Or here it is. What is this it thing? You might say, here is your hat. Or, so you use the words. Donna?
Yeah, I'm agreeing with what you're saying, that I think the more descriptive that we can be, the easier it is for people to follow and understand. And again, just be patient, allow them the time to understand. And I would say that something that I've learned over time, and I continue to learn, is that to whatever extent people can make choices for themselves, allow that. We're all here to keep each other safe. And but everybody, it's back to that respect and dignity. People want to feel that they decided. I want to feel that I made the decision, that somebody didn't decide for me, or if somebody did decide for me, that I was part of it. And so, how we communicate, how we get our points across, take into consideration that other person is an adult. And the symptoms that we're seeing, they're symptoms of they're a group of symptoms that are a disease, that they're not doing this on purpose. And that we want to respect that, how would they feel, or how might they be feeling, but they can't articulate how they're feeling.
Right.
I think we just always need to remember that. So we talked about earlier, and just for you to remember, that there were 5 key messages. So if you don't remember a whole lot, later, if you don't remember everything, just remembering that dementia is not a normal part of aging. Dementia is a group of symptoms that is something else. We talked about what's normal and what's not. Dementia is caused by diseases of the brain. The most common form of dementia or disease associated with dementia is Alzheimer's. Dementia is not just about one symptom like memory problems. It's a grouping of symptoms. And my favorite one is that, yes, it is possible to have a good quality of life, even if you have a dementia-related disease. And most importantly, there is so much more to the person than their dementia. So,
Donna.
Yes.
May I ask you a question?
Sure.
About the communication. My friend has dementia, has Alzheimer's, and we used to be very chatty as girlfriends go. I'm having a hard time. We go for walks and things like that together with the silence. My question is, do you think that she feels the silence, or it's just awkward for myself because the small talk kind of wears thin?
Right. It's hard to answer that question. Is she wanting to go on the walks? Is she enjoying the walks?
Yep.
Okay. We talked a little bit about body language.
Mm-hmm.
Look at the other signs. If she's enjoying the walk and the scenery, remember in that bookcase that there's the emotion that goes with it. Mm-hmm. So maybe the actual conversation is less important, and maybe the more important thing that she's enjoying is walking next to you.
Right.
Maybe that's the most important thing.
Yeah, I agree.
Because you're doing something that's bringing happiness. And for you, it is hard. It's really hard, that pregnant pause, that silence is difficult. I have my master's in counseling, and one of the hardest things that I learned, and I still find it hard, is to be silent and allow the silence. It's really hard.
Right.
But if you could focus on your surroundings, the walk, the weather, the breeze, that's, it gives you something else to just put your attention to.
Right. Okay. Yep. Thank you.
I hope that helps.
It does. Thank you.
Good. So the final thing that we talk about now, and then we do want to open it up a little bit more to any questions that others might have, is how to take all of this and turn this into action. Laura, you want to talk about it a little bit?
Sure. So what the Dementia Friends movement asks of each dementia friend is to turn your knowledge into action. And no action is too small. And we're not saying that you're going to go join the movement and become a dementia champion and lead workshops like Donna and I do. But it could be as simple as you share with your network of friends and family that this evening you became a dementia friend. And someone may say, well, what is that about? And tell me about that. Or how'd you hear about that? Or can I become one too? It could be as small as that. Or maybe you want to volunteer one day a month to help Donna at River House, or help us with our caregiver circle, or it could be anything, right? Maybe you'll send a card to a resident at Nathaniel Witherell in their dementia program there. So someone receives mail and opens something bright and sunny from someone that they're being thought of. So there's no thought or action that's too small. And you don't have to share what those actions are, but just to reflect on, now that you have this new level of understanding, now that you've graduated and have become a dementia friend, and you've joined the ranks of over 400 members of the Greenwich community that are also, and it's the greater Greenwich area, that are also dementia friends. What we want to accomplish is that we live in a community that supports us regardless of what we're challenged by. And that community, is an age-friendly community, is a dementia-friendly community. And the other thing that we say is, at the very least, put on your dementia-friendly lens, put on those glasses, and try to look at the world in a slightly different way. And how would you experience the world if you had a cognitive deficit, and someone was hurrying you and filling your words in, and things were noisy and confusing? And that's what Donna and I try to do. We try to put ourselves in situations that others may experience, and that's how we learn. Donna shared about the tablecloth. I also have a child that has dyslexia, and we learned the hard way about staying organized, simplifying life, simplifying language, making small steps, and just small little things that we do. And Mary, the walk that you do with your friend that has cognitive impairment, what a beautiful gift. You're already taking an action, to make the world a better place for someone living with dementia. It's just beautiful. And thank you for sharing that. And I know that you all have similar stories. There are things that you're just not even realizing are big, impactful actions that you're already taking. So thank you all for that. It's been our pleasure to spend a portion of this evening with you. If you have any questions or want to connect with either Donna or myself, you can get our contact information from the Perrot Library. You can contact us directly. I'm the director of the Commission on Aging. Donna is the director at River House. So feel free to reach out. And does anyone have any parting words or thoughts for us? Although we want to take a picture, sorry.
No, hold on. I think Barbara, did you want to say something?
Barbara, was that you?
I thought it was very informative, very well organized. I'm very happy that I did tune in tonight.
We're so happy that you were able to join us. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for a great program. You two did a great job tonight.
Thank you so much. Truly.
How can you get a workbook?
Oh, we can email you a workbook, or we can, you can pick it up from the senior center or from River House, whichever is more convenient. Or if you can't do that, we'll even mail it to you. So it couldn't be easier than that. We will get you a workbook somehow. And if we were all together, we also have Dementia Friend buttons. So if you're ever on Greenwich Avenue and you want to come by and pick up a Dementia Friend button, come into the senior center. That's where my office is. And you can pick up a button. Donna, I don't know if you have buttons at River House, but
I have buttons. Just come on by.
right. So come on by, come say hi. You know, we'll give you a button, and you know what, we wear ours with pride. Truly we do. So
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You're so welcome.
Thank you, ladies.
Thank you all. Have a great night, everybody. Stay well.